And we're live.
Oh, not really.
No, it's not live at all.
No.
Okay, take two. And we're on the internet in a couple of weeks.
We are recording.
Not live.
No.
Welcome to the Serious Comedians podcast, where comedians come to discuss things that are happening in the world. Not?
Not?
No, that's not what we do.
Okay.
No. It's not that kind of serious. It's not a news show.
We're going to talk about what's not happening in the world.
I'm going to go over all the things that is not.
Okay. What's not happening currently? Can you tell me some of the stuff that's not happening?
That's not happening currently.
We're not going to Venus. That's currently not happening.
We're not doing a live show.
We're not doing a live show.
No. This is the Serious Comedians podcast. And from now on, no more jokes, banned. Otherwise,
I wasn't.
well, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to make any jokes.
I wasn't trying either. It just happens.
Yeah. Oh, no, I don't think. Okay. That's
It's a compulsion.
okay.
The Serious Comedians podcast, where comedians, for the first time in their lives, try to be serious for a moment.
Okay.
Ever done that before?
Have I ever been serious before?
Yeah.
I've funerals. Usually.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
like a good approach.
I try.
Mm-hmm. Ever been serious on a podcast before?
Probably to some extent. I don't actually think about myself too much. So I'm not second guessing how serious or comedic I'm being.
Okay. And for all of you international listeners who don't know who this guy is, Bjarni Gautur, he is
Yes.
world famous in Iceland comedian.
World famous in Iceland.
You also do many other things.
I dabble.
What do you dabble in?
Outside of comedy, I do some acting, some producing, some writing, some editing, some directing. I've edited comic books. I've written comic books. I've done some art in comic books. I've done music, metal, and currently hip hop. Released an album of songs I did in 2015 recently on Spotify called Born in Jonestown, and I have another album currently being finished. It's in the finishing stages.
Mastering and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cool. And is it so? Those are very many different things. Is it? Do you go in phases? Do you have a hip hop phase and then you go into a comic phase, or?
No, I consider myself a satirist, and I consider it all under the umbrella of satire.
Mm.
That's how I would define it.
So different ways of doing satire.
Yeah.
That's cool. Since this is called the Comedians podcast.
Do you hear that?
Yeah, is there a mouse?
This is the worst sort of
It sounds like a mouse.
isolated sound booth.
Oh, what did you hear?
I hear a mouse, but I just think it's weird because it sounds like it's outside, right? I don't.
There's a mouse somewhere.
All right. Anyways.
All right.
You were-
Welcome to the Mouse podcast,
Yeah.
where we have mouths off screen interrupting our conversations.
Like it was tweeting, not this tweeting with its. Anyways, you were asking a question.
Yeah, maybe
squirting.
Squirt.
Is that what you said? I think it's tweet, right? No, tweet is what birds do.
I was going to say squeak.
Squeak.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
it was squeaking.
I was going to say maybe they have their own app. It's called Squeaker.
Squeaker. That'd be scary. Little rodents with little iPhones.
Yeah. What do you think they're angry about on Squeaker?
On Squeaker, the lack of plagues.
Okay, we're off to a horrible start here in the Serious Comedians podcast.
Let's continue the serious part. You were asking a question about something.
Yes, before the rude mouse interrupted us.
Yeah.
I was asking you about, what was I asking about?
I answered a question and said I was a satirist, and then you had, I think,
Yes.
a follow-up question.
Uh-huh. If it,
But I don't remember.
this is awkward.
I was saying I dabble, and
If we were watching, we could just rewind
yeah,
and go back, but we're not.
yeah, it's really awkward. It's gonna be terrible for the person who is watching,
Yeah.
who also remembers what we were talking about.
Yes,
because I've seen this when I watch sometimes podcasts and people lose the track of mine. It's like, no, you were on such a good place.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to get us talking about something serious.
Well, I love serious stuff.
And okay, how did you get started in comedy? Let's just go there.
I've always had an appreciation for the arts, and especially the art of comedy. I do consider it. What the fuck is that? That's so rude. Anyways,
I think it's somebody with wet shoes outside the door.
oh yeah, that's exactly probably what it is. I'm not gonna get angry over that anymore because I walked in here with pretty wet shoes myself, and people probably don't even hear it. But anyways,
I heard you coming a long ways away.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I felt so bad because this is the library.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't dox us. Anyways, yeah, I've always had a love for the arts and a love for comedy, and I do consider it an art form. A lot of people don't, unfortunately, and I think it's a really underrated art form. From the vaudeville acts to Abbott and Costello to Keaton to Chaplin to modern day clowns like Chris Farley and the stand-up heroes of today. I just think it's really lovely, and I've always growing up I was sort of a clownish kind of guy. Loved to entertain, loved to make people laugh.
What kind of stuff would you do in school? As a class clown?
I would do all sorts of stuff, like I would interrupt class by, I would fall on purpose in the chair. I would run on the tables. Me and my friend once dressed up in these wacky costumes, and we ran through the cafeteria and through the teacher's cafeteria.
What kind of wacky costumes?
Just we buy a bunch of stuff and just put it together. I had a half chicken face, and so it's a character I created called Wine Man, who looked like a half chicken, and
Wine Man. The half chicken.
Yeah. And he would make an appearance here and there. I would have a fake knife that goes in, and I would run into school and stab people with it.
Do you think you could do that today?
No, I to be fair, I shouldn't have been able to do it at that time either, but nobody stopped me.
No, nobody cared about those.
No, and I at one point I had this baby doll's head that I severed. Just the head, and I made a necklace out of it, and I gave it goth eyes, and I would be making out with that head. I thought that was hilarious because people were so grossed up by it.
Finding your way as a comedian.
Yeah, and then I became Greipur became my roommate.
Oh,
that's when I decided, because people have told me I had a very niche, as you can hear, comedy. And I could always make my group of friends laugh, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the stage. So they would always say, you should do stand-up. And I would always reply, no. Just because I can make 15 people laugh that have the exact same type of humor that I do doesn't mean that I can make people laugh on stage. But then Greipur moved in.
How old were you?
This is not that long ago. This is 2015. And which is actually kind of long ago. It's almost 10 years.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy how time is a thing.
Time.
Yeah,
is a
sometimes
thing.
I forget. And he moved in, and still he was making it really as a comedian, and he was doing the only English shows in Iceland at the time, which was Golden Gang Comedy, created by Gisli Johan. And
where was a Gautur?
That was a Gautur at the time. And I still didn't want to do comedy, but he would often write in our living room, and he would often test jokes on me and the other roommates. And I would often come with like suggestions, like, yeah, maybe you should do it like this. And sometimes he would take it. And I remember like at least once we had like a writing session where the three of us were just sitting in a room. We were smoking some weed. And we're trying to make each other laugh. And we're trying like to create like a good joke, the four of us together. And eventually I got sort of tired at Gautur not taking my suggestions. It's like, no, you should do it like this. And he was very independent. So eventually I just sort of out of spite and bitterness, like, I'll do it myself because I know this will work. And Gautur was also very supportive. He really pushed me towards it. Like, he introduced me to Gisli and it's like, this guy needs to go on stage.
How long do you think passed from when he moved in until you went on stage?
Maybe 3 months. 3 months of trying to write his jokes.
So you were coming up with stuff that you thought was really good, and you loved to see it done on stage, and he
Yeah.
wasn't doing it, and so you
Yeah.
said, "Okay, I'm gonna do it."
Yeah, because our writing process as a team would often be he would come up with a joke and ask me, and what do you think the punchline is? Because the punchline currently is this, and I don't know if it works. And then I would come up with something that I thought was, of course, funnier, and then he would say, "No, I'll keep it the way it is." So that was really frustrating to the point of me going on stage. And I what I did was I just had a piece of paper and I filled it up. It's like an essay. And I went on stage, and the first time I went on stage, it was Gary Anthony Williams was the headliner. If you know him, he's Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks.
Is he the guy from Flubber?
I don't know if he's in Flubber, but he's in Malcolm in the Middle. He's in Undercover Brother, a bunch of stuff.
Mrs. Doubtfire?
I don't know. No, you're thinking of Robin Williams. Gary Anthony Williams is a man of African descent.
Oh, not related to.
Not related to Robin, no.
Okay.
Sorry. And he was headlining, and Nick Jameson was there, and I remember just killing it, and that was not good for my ego.
So you did well from the get-go.
Yes, but then my second time I bombed.
So just the first time.
So the first time I killed, the second time I bombed. So it was a nice contrast. I got to experience the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
sort of.
Bombing the second, doing good the first time, bombing the second time. That's a dangerous combo because you might never do it again.
Yes, and that could have happened, but it's hard because I was living with Gautur. So I would. Before I started doing stand-up, I would come to the shows with him, and that was like something we did every Monday. And now there was no reason, because I was still coming with him, and now I've been on stage twice, so why not continue going up on stage? Because I have that ego. Jim Carrey said the same thing when he saw comedy for the first time. I think it was David Letterman and a bunch of greats, and he thought to himself, I could do that. And I've been the same way, that doesn't matter how good you are, it's hard for me to be in the audience. If I'm going to see a rap show or a comedy show, I want to go on stage. Like, even if I decide, like, I'm just going to watch, like, which is why it's good to do the open mics, because especially if you've done it for long enough, you can go like, sign me up, even though the signs are closed. But yeah, so I find it hard to just sit back and watch other people show off their quote-unquote talents and me not doing the same thing.
And do you remember your approach to the first shows? You say you had this piece of paper. Was it written by hand?
Yeah.
And did you write it verbatim? So were you going to recite exactly what's on the paper?
Yes.
Like a script?
Like a script. And the first couple of times I did stand-up, it was very different from what I do now. So what I did was I always dressed up very nicely. Like I was going to a bar mitzvah or a wedding. And I would have this piece of paper in front of me, and I would read it. I wouldn't even look at the audience necessarily. I would just read exactly what I wrote. And sometimes it would be long rants. Yeah. Usually it'd be short jokes with puns or something, but I would always be like, and I would walk up on stage and I would take my time getting like the piece of paper out, and I would look at it, and I thought that was really funny. But I learned quickly that, and I learned this from watching a friend of ours called Hugh Coverdale Jones.
Yeah.
Because he was doing this amazing bit and people were loving it. And then he took up a piece of paper with notes and said like, okay, what else? What else did I have? And I heard, like, almost like a magician revealing a string.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of the laughter sort of left the room.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was that what people want to see in comedy, or want to believe that they're seeing, is somebody being spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
And watching back to a lot of stand-up, you can tell, like, you could, especially when you've been doing it for a long time yourself, you can see people that you might be doing the same exact set they've done for 3 years straight, but they'll do it like, oh, what were we talking about? Oh, like they'll act like you're having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people want to hear. They want to believe, want to be able to give the illusion that what they're experiencing is, oh, this guy is just going off. He's saying something spontaneous. I'm in the audience hearing it. And it's comedians and wrestlers are the only two performers that have to act. They can't break that sort of theatricals.
Mm-hmm.
You have to sort of pretend that everything you're saying is not only true, but also happening without any sort of rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been sort of theatrical in person. And it took me a while to realize that, of course, I should also do that on stage. Because I feel like you can have different sort of personalities. And I thought it was really funny to do sort of this monotone Mitch Hedberg sort of character. But when I get off stage, I'm very active and loud. So
some of your bits that you do now have really funny voices and like you're acting something out.
Yeah, because I do that a lot off stage. So it made sense to also incorporate that on stage. So I've been doing that, and I'm very inspired by people like Bill Hicks, Sam Kinison, and I think that sort of course, still Mitch Hedberg, but I think that I've tried to incorporate more than just one set of character.
Okay, so you started out with this script that you're basically reading up, kind of dry, I imagine.
Yeah.
And making it work that way. And you say that that's quite different from what you do now. So what is your approach to comedy now?
I try to have that spontaneity factor. I don't go up with a script. I do have sort of an idea of what I want to do, but I try to do it very loosey-goosey. And I try to have a lot of energy. So it's more free flow, and it's more yelling, for lack of a better term.
Okay. And do you remember any of the first stuff that you had? Any of the first jokes on that in that script that you had? What kind of material was that?
I do remember there were a couple of jokes that I did. One that I still do today because it sometimes gets the biggest laughs. And a joke I had from the beginning that I still do is, I heard if you smoke weed in Saudi Arabia, you get stoned.
Yeah, I heard you do that. Yeah.
And that did have a follow-up joke that I've sort of stopped doing, but the follow-up joke was, and I've heard if you're looking for hung homosexuals, you can find plenty of them in Iran.
Yeah. That's a mood killer.
Yeah, and sometimes it killed, like literally killed, and sometimes it killed the mood.
Yeah.
And that's why I sort of stopped doing it, because people, and that's another funny thing about comedy is, and that's something I've learned, is that people sometimes feel like people sort of felt that was a anti-gay joke or pro-Iran joke, but what I am is referencing a very serious issue in the Middle East, and I'm making fun of it to draw attention to it, which is what satire is supposed to do, I think. Yeah. That's my interpretation of satire, at least. And that's the same thing with Saudi Arabia. Like, it's the fact that people find it funnier that somebody might get stoned, like rocks thrown to them until they die. That's okay to laugh at, but somebody getting hanged is off limits. I think that's sort of silly. But you also need to give the people what they want. I think it was Milton Berle said, pick your spots. Like, if everybody cringes or like, oh, I don't know about that, like, maybe you should stop doing the joke.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like a free speech fight. But you have to be careful also, just because I figured that I had a joke that for a long time was just, I would say a joke and then I would just go straight into saying, God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Then I would ask the question, then who created Steve? And I realized by wording the joke that way, people got upset. Because if people think you're saying something, they might choose out of like, oh, I'm not going to laugh now, like sort of as a protest.
Yeah.
So, and I was making fun of the statement but by making the statement myself, people were assuming that I was no longer a comedian doing a bit. I was now suddenly expressing my real opinion. So I just by adding, I was talking to a far right friend of mine, and he said, then people can realize, oh, we're laughing at this statement together.
How dumb this other person is.
Yeah. So I thought for a long time, I thought it was really funny to just make dumb statements.
Yeah.
But I realized people will feel a lot comfortable if I pretty much make it as clear as possible. Hey, I heard this dumb statement. Isn't it dumb?
Yeah. And what I think you're describing there is that the people will actually have prejudices against the comic. So they're more ready to believe that you hold certain positions based on how you look, how you appear, the way you talk, and things like that. And so if you get into the area of maybe sounding like you're saying something that could be interpreted like you have an opinion about something, then they're quicker to believe it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. I don't know how much appearance based it is, but I do think you could be onto something, because I do think, it's also how you present yourself. I definitely think that, like, if there's a person who's queer on stage and has presented themselves as queer on stage, like you, by either mentioning it or being flamboyant or any number of things, them start suddenly going, God created Adam, like without explaining it, would of course cause probably less ruckus, because people know, like, oh, obviously this person isn't homophobic.
They're not jumping to some conclusion.
They're not going to jump to the conclusion, sure. And yeah, sure, you could say that it's the plight of the straight white man that I have to be a little bit more careful so people are aware of where my alliances lie. You can word it that way, for sure.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
People are...
It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Some people are ready to jump to the conclusions that we might be...
No, it's true.
Sexist or
racist
or homophobic or something.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I've I'm not going to mention names because they probably don't want to feel like we're trying to cancel them. But I know a lot of super liberal allies that are heterosexuals, but they make jokes that are making fun of racist and sexist. And sometimes, again, they do so well, and then they can do the same joke verbatim, and the audience will just assume that it is an attack on a marginalized group. Yeah. And they won't necessarily get boos, but they will get silence, uncomfortable silence. And I think it's happened to both of us too.
Yeah, I feel like, because I'm from the Faroe Islands, I think I have to stray away from anything that could suggest and that anybody could interpret as me being homophobic. Yeah, I have. Being religious. I don't want people to assume that I'm religious or homophobic. Obviously,
because that's sort of not even
people are quick to jump to that conclusion.
Because we went to the Faroe Islands, and I would say Faroe Islands is a very non-homophobic, a very liberal place, but the stigma that they have is certainly, it's a super Christian, super homophobic place. And when we went there together, I didn't meet a single person that said any derogatory things about homosexuals. Everyone I talked to was 100% an ally. Yep. And but that doesn't change the fact that you're right, that it is sort of the prejudice, actually, the stigma. That so if you go on stage and would suddenly make that joke, if you would go on stage and just say God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, people might walk out, because they would just automatically assume that this is no longer a comedy show, but just some hate
this is just
speech.
This is just some homophobe who's getting mic time.
And I mean, that was a battle that I took for a while, because especially living with Greipur, because we would have a lot of edgy jokes, but we never felt that our jokes were actually punching down. And I'm also a contrarian, and I like to make arguments, like to make a fuss. So, and Gisli was always on board, just letting you do what you want to do. So we would often take that fight. We would often do jokes that people would misunderstand. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to be like, oh, maybe I should, make sure people don't misunderstand it. Rather, me and Greipur would be like, no, I'm not doing anything wrong. They're the problem. And sometimes that's the case, but that doesn't mean, again, pick your spots. We are here to make people laugh. And if you word something in a way that is easily misunderstood, maybe you need to reword it. That doesn't mean that you suddenly hate free speech. It just means you're trying to think smart.
It means that what your bit is missing is some context.
Yes.
You need to add that context somehow.
And it's something that I learned from Trauma when I worked with them, is that they always said, you have to sort of assume everyone's an idiot. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I've talked to people when they I have a joke that hasn't worked, and they tell me the joke, and I tell them, you have to explain more. Because even though you get it, you're always going to get your own jokes because you're the one who wrote it. And maybe your friends will get it because they know who you are. But sometimes you just have to add more context, more detail, just so everyone's on the same Jimmy page. What's going on?
Is that a thing that you do? That you say everyone's on the same Jimmy page?
Yeah.
All right, I don't want to steal that, but maybe I won't. You said working with Trauma.
Trauma, yeah.
Trauma. What is Trauma?
Trauma is the oldest independent film company in the world. Founded in 1974 by Yale graduates Luke Hoffman and Michael Herz. Based in New York City. It's the birthplace of the Toxic Avenger, the first superhero from New Jersey. They're the first people that made movies with Trey Parker, Matt Stone from South Park, James Gunn, who did Guardians of the Galaxy, Jenna Fisher from The Office, Samuel L. Jackson, Eli Roth, Robert De Niro, Kevin Costner, Dustin Hoffman all started there. Billy Bob Thornton, Paul Walker from Fast and the Furious, Fergie from Black Eyed Peas. It's a smorgasbord of talent. When Professor Irvin Corey and Sarah Mostel got blacklisted, the only people that worked with them were Mel Brooks and Trauma. And they've done over 800 movies, both produced and distributed. And they've really shaped my views on comedy and my views of sort of pushing the envelope and my views of satire and social commentary.
What have you been doing with them?
I've edited movies for them. I've been a production assistant on stuff. I've been a body double. I've produced. I've acted. I've done street performance when we promote movies, both in New York and in the Cannes Film Festival. Just a little bit of everything.
Have they been? Do they have an office here in Iceland, or were you living abroad at that time?
I was living abroad. The closest thing to an office in Iceland is just my apartment. But yeah, I was living in New York for a while.
When were you living in New York?
2008 mostly. But then when they were making a movie in 2012 and 2018, I moved for the summer. And when they make movies, people come from all over the world, and we all live together in a house. It's like a little bit of Jonestown, It's during the filming of Return to Nukem High in 2012, we all lived in an abandoned funeral parlor. 80 people together for 3 months, one shower. We all slept on mattresses, air mattresses that we bought at Walmart. And yeah, it was fun.
Is that how you... Now, how did you get involved with them?
I grew up, they had a cartoon show that they did with the people that made Ninja Turtles called The Toxic Crusaders. And I watched that as a kid alongside Captain Planet. Sort of like a environmental propaganda. And I loved it. I really wanted to crush corporatism. I really wanted to help make the planet a better place. Also wanted to make cartoons and also wanted to make comics. And growing up in Sweden, I read the Toxic Avenger comics. I watched the Toxic Avenger cartoon show. And with the Ninja Turtles, I owned the action figures. I was a big fan. And then when I was 10, I figured out that it was actually a feature-length horror movie. And I watched that and immediately fell in love. And when I got 13, I got my first Amazon account, and I was able to buy their recent releases on DVD. And before that, I'd found a couple of movies here and there in like video rental stores. And I sent them a letter when I was like 14, a fan letter. I felt Lloyd Kaufman's like the more active guy. He's like the Stan Lee of the Troma. So I sent a letter to Michael Hers because I figured like, if anybody, like Lloyd's busy, but maybe if I send a letter to Michael Hers, he'll read it. And I sent him a fan letter, and he wrote back, and he was like, "Oh, thanks for the letter." And Toxie says, "Clean your room." And then a couple of years later, they were having a Troma retrospective here in Iceland. And so I got a letter.
What does that mean, a Troma retrospective?
They were doing like a film festival here, independent film festival, and they were showing 6 Troma movies. Toxic Avenger, Class of Nukem High, Cannibal the Musical, which Trey Parker actually made, Terra Firma, and Citizen Toxie, which was their latest film at the time. And they only knew a couple of people here, so they asked me, like, hey, do you want to volunteer, sort of help around, play Toxie, which is like because the Toxic Avenger Toxie is almost like the Mickey Mouse. He's like the mascot. So when Lloyd introduces a movie, I'm there with the Toxic Avenger mask and a mop, like dancing in the background. So that was my first thing that I did with them. And then they were off to film a movie called Poultrygeist the next year, and I couldn't make it because I was just 16. But I was making my own feature-length film, and Lloyd graciously cameoed as my dad who molests me, which I thought, again, it was very hilarious at the time. And then when they made their next movie, I told them, like, hey, whenever... Well, before that, actually, when I went to film school, part of the film school was you're supposed to go somewhere, work for a company for a while. And all my friends were sort of just, working at Stöð 2, like the local channels here in Iceland, and, just doing intern work. But I just sent them a letter. It's like, hey, can I come to New York, work for a while? And they said yes. And that was fun. I helped with a YouTube channel. I worked on making DVDs, did like the scene selections for 10-year anniversaries of movies. And then when they made their next movie, they had me in mind, and I was just a phone call away. And and every time they're doing something big or something in Europe, they give me a call.
Mm-hmm. You said, so when they're doing the next movie, they could have you in mind.
Yeah.
Did they have you in mind?
Yeah, that was Return to Nukem High. So after I interned for them, I did Return to Nukem High. And
what did you do in that movie?
I was a main production assistant, which means I did a little bit of everything. I was an actor person, which is a nice word for a glorified extra, which means when they need to fill up the screen, I was there in the background doing something wacky. And I was also part of the behind-the-scenes crew, because one of my favorite things about, and because they knew I graduated from film school at the time and stuff like that, but one of my favorite things about Troma was the fact that they had these great behind-the-scenes movies. And a lot of people actually think the behind-the-scenes movies are actually better than the feature movies. Mm-hmm. And I was a big fan of those. And just the idea of working on one of those, just walking around with a camera, filming stuff, and I actually made a lot of... Because we had a film crew from Hollywood. Like the camera crew was from Hollywood. And on my first day as a behind-the-scenes camera, they messed up. And I was just in their face with that camera. And I was just thinking, this footage is great. But what I was really doing was I was making enemies for life.
What were you doing?
No, because they... it wasn't even their fault. It was... a guy, because they had like these memory cards, they're like $8,000, and somebody had walked off set because he got fired with it in his pocket. So it wasn't their fault; they had nothing to do with it. But when I showed up on set, they were frantically searching for an $8,000 card that nobody could find. So I was in their face with a camera, filming them, not finding it, thinking this is amazing. This is going to be such a good behind-the-scenes documentary. But of course, they don't like that, because they were like they had been like a second unit for a bunch of Hollywood movies, and this was going to be their first time as the main unit. Yeah. So this movie was going to be sort of like their jumping off point, which is why they were doing it for very little money. And of course, they don't want, because if anybody is going to hire them in the future, they don't want to. No one's going to hire somebody if you watch a behind the scenes movie and it's just you
stuff.
fucking up.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So they got really, really pissed at me, understandably. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And what is it about these behind the scenes things that people love?
Well, it's the same reason I think why people love the Apocalypse Now documentary, if you've seen that. They did a behind-the-scenes movie called Hearts of Darkness, which is about the creation of Apocalypse Now. Mm-hmm. And what happened on the set of Apocalypse Now was because they were filming sort of in the middle of nowhere. They were all sort of together. And what happens when you're sort of cut off from the real world, so to speak, and you're sort of stuck in this other world, is that, you know, it sort of becomes like this sort of cult-ish thing. Like nothing matters except for the movie, you know? And there's also this level of Stockholm Syndrome and all that. And Francis Ford Coppola said about the making of Apocalypse Now that gradually we became insane. And watching the behind-the-scenes movies, that's really what it is, because you're watching people, a lot of them working for free, but all of them passionate about art, about independent cinema, and everybody sort of pushing themselves to the limit to make what is literally a $5 million movie on the budget of $300,000. So it's 18-hour days. It's you eat maybe once a day, and you build up camaraderie, but it also sort of becomes, to an extent, the sort of us versus them thing. So with the Return to Nukem High, we sort of went mad for a little bit, and it sort of became us versus the camera crew in our heads. I mean, they were just fine people. There was nothing wrong with them, really. But you were like, oh, we're like the guys. We're like the grunts. We're like the real independent guys. We're Trauma. And then these guys, they're these fucking Hollywood guys. And at one point, we like put war paint on. And a lot of that got actually cut out of the movie because in hindsight, we just came off as pieces of shit. But at the time, we felt so vindicated. Like we were the underdogs. We were the good guys.
So you're describing all these things that go on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And and in the Apocalypse Now movie, you're describing how the conditions under which it was made.
Yeah.
People having to go all the extra miles and working really hard, and the effect it has on these people. And in the case of the movie, Return to
Nukem High.
To Nukem High.
Yeah.
There was created this dynamic with the camera crew where you were rivals or
it felt that way to an extent because like we all lived in the abandoned funeral parlor. They didn't. Mm-hmm. They had like a fancy hotel.
Oh, okay.
So just
okay. So
it was like class warfare, but it's all in our minds. Like it wasn't like an actual issue.
So you're describing of
and not everybody felt that way, which is why just me and a couple of others sort of went insane for it a little bit.
Okay. And so this is all going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And people love watching this stuff.
Yeah, because it's just the same reason people want to watch reality TV shows and Survivor and all that. You want to watch the drama. You want to watch people sort of lose it for a little bit.
Yeah, reality TV shows a good comparison probably because you're showing the reality of making this.
Yeah,
the movie is made up.
Yeah,
it's fictional.
Yeah,
and then the making of is the real part, the real the reality of it. That's interesting. I watch the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia podcast, which is kind of the same. They're talking about how they made stuff, and as you were talking about this, I was thinking, I guess I find it interesting because I love the product that they made, and I'm really interested in hearing them talk about how they made it.
Yeah,
and they're also really funny. So yeah, it makes sense that if you love a product, you would be very, very interested in seeing how it was made and the things that the people would go through that made it.
I think the more passion you have for something, the more you're interested in finding out how the sausage is made, for lack of a better term. You like to fill in the gaps of your history of something. And documentaries, podcasts, behind the scenes, they all help.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's definitely a factor. And I mean, that's why people enjoy those things, 100%. And because I enjoy certain things more than others. So if there's like with Vanilla Ice, if there's a certain podcast with him on it, I'll watch it.
You love Vanilla Ice.
I love Vanilla Ice. He's a great guy. And so I'll do it under the pretense of, maybe I'll hear something I haven't heard before. Usually doesn't happen, or it's something that he's only talked about a couple of times.
Tell me about your history with Vanilla Ice. How did you discover Vanilla Ice?
I was a big Ninja Turtles fan. It all starts with the Ninja Turtles. That's
Me too.
how
I loved them when I was 6 or something.
You don't love them anymore?
I guess I still do.
You should check out their original comic book.
Okay.
Because it was made for adults in mind. And it's probably the most successful independent comic book of all time. Ninja Turtles issue 1, printed originally 3,000 copies, sold out immediately. It's the issue that's never been reprinted. No other issue has been reprinted as often as Ninja Turtles 1. And it created an empire. And it's one of the few empires that until 2009 was just a couple of dudes.
Is that how Ninja Turtles was created from this comic?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman were just two guys who wanted to make comic books, and then they were goofing off, and one of them drew a Ninja Turtle, and then somebody added Teenage Mutant and drew 3 more. They were like, let's just make this comic. And it was just out of love for comic books. It's actually, a lot of it's based on Daredevil. Their love for Frank Miller's version of Daredevil. Because if you know anything about Daredevil, his teacher is Stick. So the Ninja Turtles are trained by Splinter. The Daredevil's enemies is the Hand. So the Turtles fight the Foot. So it was just like a parody of this dark and gritty 80s comic book style that was going on at the time, but also taking itself seriously at the same time. And it's just filled with, like Picasso said, good artists steal. So Ninja Turtles is really original because it takes all these ideas from different things. And then they made a deal with this company called Surge Licensing. And Surge Licensing was the one who just, let's make keychains, let's make this and that, let's make a video game. And Fred Wolf contacted Surge because they had a deal with Playmates. It's like, we want to make action figures. And if you're going to make action figures and have them sell, you have to have a cartoon show. So Fred Wolf contacted the guys who made the Dragon Ball cartoons. Like, I'm going to hire you guys to do 5 episodes just so we have enough to sell the toys. And then, of course, the toys sold out. And everybody loved the show, and it just took off from there. But Ninja Turtles then made a movie in 1990 with Jim Henson doing the puppeteering. And, again, completely independent. And until Blair Witch Project, it was the highest grossing independent movie of all time. And then when they made the sequel, they had big shoes to fill. And at the time, Vanilla Ice was the first rapper in history, another milestone, to have a number 1 on the billboards with Ice Ice Baby. It was the first time in history. Rap had sort of gone from being played in keg parties to now suddenly being on the radio. It was him and MC Hammer that took it from the inner cities to the suburbs. And at the time, they both got a lot of love and a lot of hate for that. A lot of hip-hop hipsters felt that somebody was taking their culture and sort of making money off of it. But neither of them thought that anything would ever happen like that. Because before, they thought like, if we're lucky, we're going to go gold. Because that's what Run DMC had done. They sold 500,000 copies. And now suddenly, Vanilla Ice had sold 11 million in a couple of weeks. And it was the fastest-selling hip-hop album as well. And these things clashed together. And they asked him at the height of his career, when he's not completely at the height, when he's getting close to the height of his career, when he's reaching his peak, he was opening up for MC Hammer at the time, and they asked him to be in Ninja Turtles 2. And that's when I saw him for the first time. That's the first movie I saw. I missed the first one. It was too gritty and dark for me. I saw Secret of the Ooze, loved it. And it ends with Vanilla Ice performing a song called the Ninja Rap, which he wrote in 30 minutes to a beat that his DJ, Earthquake, Floyd Brown, had already created. It was something that they used to dance to, like a dance break between songs. And he wrote the lyrics in 30 minutes, which is actually shorter. It took him 15 minutes to write Ice Ice Baby. So his two biggest hits.
15?
Yeah. So his two biggest hits were the songs he spent the least amount of time on. He went to the studio, recorded it, and it's honestly probably the song he's most remembered for it outside of Ice Ice Baby now, because of like the Ninja
what's
Turtles.
The name of it?
Ninja Rap.
Ninja Rap.
Yeah. Because of sort of the Ninja Turtles generation. And because the Ninja Turtles keep living. You know, they keep getting different iterations. And they sort of started, for a while, both Vanilla Ice and Ninja Turtles sort of wanted to try to get out of the shadows of like the 90s counterpart. So in 2003, both of them were sort of like, no, that's not all we are. But then in like 2009, they were sort of embracing it. So he's been collaborating more with the Ninja Turtles. Michael Bay, actually, who produced the last two live-action movies, his first directional debut was a Vanilla Ice music video. So Michael Bay like had Ninja Rap in one of the new movies, and Vanilla Ice like was at the premiere, and he still has like Ninja Turtles show up and dance with him on stage. But yeah, my first introduction was Ninja Rap.
Okay, so you saw it in this movie.
Yeah.
And did you immediately gravitate towards him, or how did this develop?
Not really. Like I love that song, and I connected him always with the Ninja Turtles, which probably helped. Thought Ice Ice Baby was fun, and then I bought. Didn't listen to anything else he did on that first album, and then I bought it when I was years later, and I listened to it, and it didn't really do anything for me. I thought the rest of the album was sort of bad at the time. Listening to it now, I can really appreciate it. But his album To the Extreme, the one that sold, it has now sold 28 million copies overall. And that album, I remember when the first time I listened to it, I was like, I don't see the appeal. Ice Ice Baby is great, and then the album just keeps on going. But at the time, when I was like 11, I was really I was loved exploring the internet. And one of the things you did, because Google wasn't really that big, you would either use Alta Vista to find something, or you would just write something and then .com and hope that somebody had a website. Mm-hmm. So Troma.com had a website, great website, very interactive. NinjaTurtles.com had a website, very interactive. And I would interact with the forums on these website and the webmasters who would know me and stuff like that. And then I would try vanillaice.com. And he had a website. And that's when I realized, he's still making music. And he had an album at the time called Bipolar. And I remember you could listen to samples of the songs. And I remember just being hooked on those samples. Because I couldn't buy it anywhere. I couldn't download it anywhere because it was that sort of underground. But I could listen to parts of the song, and I would just do that constantly. I thought that was probably the best album I'd heard up until that point.
So he had been at the height of his career, and then years later you find his website,
yeah,
and you see it has this new album out, which at this point you can't get anywhere here.
Yeah.
Okay. So the height of his career was past.
Yeah.
And you rediscover him.
Yeah.
And you love what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens?
And then I just sort of, follow his career as much as I can from Iceland. And then eventually I'm able to download the songs. I find them on Kazaa or Audio Galaxy or one of those sites. Somebody has uploaded all the music. Mm-hmm. And the songs are even better when you hear the full song, I thought. And then he releases another album called Platinum Underground, and I listen to that, and I'm a big fan of that too. And then I just really like his music, and YouTube comes around, and You can see footage of him performing live. You can see footage of him, interviews, and I just think he's a really cool cat. And then eventually, I was also like connected to like the Vanilla Ice fans. Mm-hmm. And what was fun with that is because, like with the Troma fans, like if you're like a super fan of these niche things, it's a tight group. It's not a big group necessarily. It's like somewhere between 300 to 600 people are like the people that you keep seeing online over and over again. Eventually make connections with them.
In forums and stuff.
Yeah. And then eventually on Facebook and like groups and stuff. But before that, it was the forums and message boards and stuff. And
so you eventually get to know these people better and better who are also big fans of.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And through the Vanilla Ice people, they send me stuff, like rare stuff. Like here's footage of him dancing on stage in the 1980s. Here's footage of him performing in Hong Kong. Here's footage of him performing in these countries and stuff like that in Russia. And we sort of like, become like this group of like, because it was really hard to find, especially like I remember his Wikipedia page for a while. It was just like he did stuff in the 90s and then he sort of did stuff in the 2000s. And there was all this stuff in between. And what was fun with exploring Vanilla Ice was his life kept getting, like we were filling in the gaps. And it was like, oh, actually he was the 6th best jet ski racer in the world. Oh, he was the first rapper to ever perform in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. He was the first rapper to perform in China. He was a motocross champion. Like all these stuff started like filling up. He was like, oh, he did this event where he drove his motorcycle through a burning wall, like with Leslie Nielsen as the host of the event. It kept filling up.
So you it sounds like you became such a big fan that you basically wanted to know everything you could about him.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that it really helped was because the information wasn't readily available. Like if you, at the time, in the mid-2000s, like when Wikipedia was new, if you were reading about Ice Cube, like his entire life story was there. But with Vanilla Ice, like it wasn't. So you had to buy magazines, interviews from 1993, or find these videotapes, and they would fill in the gap. And what I would do is I would try to update the bio. I would add stuff in and sort of fill in the gap of, because I felt like this guy has actually lived a really interesting life, and it seems like it's sort of been memory hold, for lack of a better term. Like it's not being, like it was really big in the 90s, and now that the internet's sort of taken over as this archive thing, nobody's archiving it. So I felt like, at a time, I was like, somebody should put this all together, somebody should make like a documentary, and then I figured, oh, that's me. That's what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Nobody else is gonna do that.
Yeah. So you were like a mega fan, and you were trying to get as much information about it as possible. And then it dawns on you that you would want to see some kind of documentary, and you could be the one who make it.
Yeah. I figured like somebody should make this documentary. And the thing I realized is when you say somebody should, what you're really trying to say is you should do that.
Yeah. It's an opportunity for you to do it.
Yeah. Because I had all this information, I had all this footage, and I realized no one else was going to do it for me. So I did it myself. So I made a movie called Vanilla Ice Archive, where I archived his entire life from 1985 to 2012, when the movie came out. It took me 8 months.
Until when?
2012.
That's when it came out?
Yeah.
How did you release it?
YouTube. Because there's no other way because of all the copyright. Because everything, it's technically fair use because it's for educational and historical purposes. But this is a movie you could not release on Blu-ray. It actually has been released on VHS, but very unofficially.
How did you make it?
I had all this footage, and I just...
You've been collecting stuff.
Yeah, just
without even thinking about this documentary.
Without even thinking about it, and I had all this footage. And originally he did a song called Detonator, which I think is one of the best songs I've ever heard, and it wasn't on YouTube. And I figured like I should upload the song to YouTube. But I didn't want to just because I'm also an editor, so I didn't just want to upload the song that I didn't make on YouTube by itself. So I decided to make a music video for it. So I put together, I think it was over 120 different clips from spanning his entire career, where I edited together and made a music video. And he actually saw it and liked it and posted it on his Twitter and website. Mm. And that's how I got in touch with him. But when I was editing that, I figured like, oh, too bad that I'm just editing this music video because he was doing Dancing on Ice at the time. And he was then doing this press release, press tour for that show. And he would go on about his early days in the 80s. And I figured, like, there's actually a really fun story about how he starts off as sort of like this breakdancer in the hood and just with a group of friends. And then he sort of gets spotted and he becomes a dancer at this club in South Dallas. And then takes part in like this rap freestyle contest, and he wins a record deal with like a really small company, and he was just telling the story, and I figured like I can actually edit this into a coherent like this could be like an opening for a movie.
And it's kind of the same thing that you did for the music video.
Yeah. But
putting together footage.
But now I was doing the story, and so what I did was I just made a chronological timeline through interviews and all the footage that I had, and did my best to tell the man's life story. And the reception I got was amazing, because there's a lot of hip-hop heads who had sort of not given him the sort of attention that he deserved, because
he was kind of pushed to the side.
Yeah.
After he reached the top, he became kind of a joke. To a lot of people.
Because because him and Hammer both had the same sort of problem, that by making music that became mainstream, they were sort of no longer taken serious as real hip-hop acts. They were pop rappers. So years of goodwill, like, because he spent 5 years touring with Public Enemy and Ice-T and NWA, all that was sort of erased, because now, instead of being one of the guys, he was this white guy who was making millions. He was making bank. So he sort of became the problem. And it took a while for mainstream rap to sort of get the recognition that it's okay to make money. You know, it was sort of, because not everyone was making money. So for a while, just by being successful, he became a target. And people watching the movie, because nobody does the research necessarily. So you just see like somebody, and people say he's good, and then you say he's bad or whatever. You don't think about it. So a lot of people seeing like, oh, actually, you know, he did the work. Like he actually does deserve respect. A lot of people didn't realize that until they saw the movie. So I got a lot of comments from people that, you know, let me know, like, you actually made me a fan. You actually made me realize that I was missing out. And that's sort of what I wanted to do, you know, not necessarily influence people in that direction. I just wanted to show the world, for lack of a better term, what I thought was interesting about him. And it worked, thankfully, yeah.
And you say that's how you got in contact with him?
Yeah, through the music video, yeah.
Yeah, and what do you mean when you say that's how you got into contact with him?
We just started talking on Twitter, and he really loved the music video, and I eventually did another music video, and then he was releasing a new album, and he asked me to do some promotional work for that. And they had filmed a concert, and he wanted to edit it to a song called Cadillac Ninjas, which is on his upcoming album. So I edited that for him, and and he was just really grateful. You know, he's a guy that really appreciates the love and support he gets from his fans, especially like his true loyal fans. And he just appreciated everything I'd done, and to the point of, you know, if he's doing a concert and I'm in town, you know, I'll get a backstage pass and we'll hang out at the after party and stuff like that. So
you're friends with Vanilla Ice?
Yeah, pretty much.
with your your hero.
Yeah, I've been very lucky in the fact that I've been sort of able to cross everything off my bucket list. Everyone that I've wanted to work with, everyone that I've considered an idol to a certain extent, I have been able to mentor under them to some extent. Be it through Trauma, Lloyd Kaufman, or Vanilla Ice, or Gunnar Hansen. Gunnar Hansen is another one who played Leatherface. He was a big hero of mine, and I was able to work with him before he passed away. So I consider myself extremely lucky in that regard that when I was very young, I felt like, oh, I can actually die pretty happy because I've done everything I wanted to do. Now I need to find something new to do, something new people to.
You're too efficient at reaching your
Apparently,
goals.
yeah, it sucks. No,
Man,
but
I haven't met any of mine.
you need to aim lower. No, but it was great because because he introduces me to people like at the after party, like he grabs me and goes like, "This is the guy who makes all the videos that you like on my webpage." Like,
You're glossing over how you're talking over Twitter. You say, "Oh yeah, we just started talking over Twitter."
oh yeah,
How do you start talking to? Vanilla Ice on
he
Twitter.
contacts me.
He sends you a direct message.
Yeah, a DM because I just have my name on Twitter. And he's like, "Hey man, are you the guy who did the detonator video?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh man, that's so cool. Can I put it on my website?" That's just how it starts. And I was like, "Of course."
Okay, but it doesn't end there. And then how does it keep going? That could have just ended there.
Yeah, then we just keep talking and.
What are you talking about? We just keep talking. What do you talk with Vanilla Ice about?
Well, like, cause I'm a big rap fan, so I'm like, I'm like, hey, you don't have to use this lyric, but I think it would be really cool if you would rap this. And he hasn't yet, so he probably doesn't. But he's really nice. He's like, oh, dope, yeah, cool. Can I send you some lyric ideas? And
You sent him lyric suggestions.
yeah.
So first you talk about this video.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about lyric suggestions.
Yeah.
And he doesn't block you.
No.
You still keep talking.
And I tell him like, oh, my favorite album was the one you did with Joe Cooley. Joe Cooley is one of the greatest DJs ever. I was like, you need to do more stuff with Joe Cooley. He's like, yeah, man. So I'm just like a really annoying fan, like in his ear, like you should do this, and he's like, yeah.
So is it like that for a while, where you're reaching out? So he sends you this message.
Yeah.
I love this video, whatever. Can I put on my website?
Yeah.
And then you keep talking, and it's like you talking about his lyrics,
Yeah.
suggesting stuff, and then you're giving him music suggestions.
As a super fan, I'm sort of like, here's where I would love to see you go in your next direction.
Yeah,
your next album.
and he's listening, he's responding to you. He's looking at the message.
He's at least nice enough to pretend to be taking it seriously.
Yeah.
So which is all you can ask when you're talking to like, someone you look up to.
So at least in the face of it, he's taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And
As far as
responding to you.
Yeah.
And so it just goes on like that for a while.
Yeah.
And then how does it turn into more collaborations? Did you come with some suggestion about doing something?
Well, it wasn't. No. He tells me that he's. I edit more stuff, and he tells me that he's working on this video, and he wants me to edit it.
Okay, so you throw in there that you're editing other stuff.
Well, I just there's another song he did called "Get Your Ass Up," and I just, for the fun of it, not because he asked me to, I just also edited a music video for that. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I do a little promo for his upcoming album. He was like, "Oh, dude, that's so dope," and he's like, "Can I put it on the website?" And then he asked me if I could help him edit because he has a single for his upcoming album called "Wisdom, Tenacity, and Focus." And he asked me if I could edit that. Mm-hmm. And I would say, just of course.
Has he ever been to Iceland?
He apparently came here in my archive search. As you know, I'm a big archive man. He allegedly came here in 1992, but I haven't found any like hardcore info on it.
Vanilla Iceland.
Yeah.
You haven't confirmed it, but allegedly.
He's pretty sure that he came here. And according to, I've seen like in the archives, they mentioned it, but I haven't found like any concert footage. I haven't found any advertisements for the actual concert. He was supposed to come here a couple of years ago too, and that sort of failed.
Okay.
But yeah, and I gave him actually Return to Nukem High on Blu-ray. Well, Lloyd Kaufman gave me a copy to give to him. And because Lemmy from Motorhead, he plays the president of the United States, and for a while when they were doing a sequel to Return to Nukem High, they were going to have him play the Prime Minister of the UK, which would have been funny. But
any others of your heroes that you've met?
Well, I've met a lot. Worked with is maybe not necessarily the same thing. I've conversed with Corey Feldman.
Oh yeah, who we've talked about before.
before.
Yeah,
and the Ninja Turtles guys. I've met him.
Talk to me about Corey Feldman. Well, how did you, for lack of a better term, fall in love with Corey Feldman?
It's a good question. I really loved his 80s movies first and foremost. I thought when the first movie I saw with Corey Feldman was The Burbs. Have you ever seen The Burbs?
The Burbs?
The Burbs.
Is the word?
No, burb, not bird.
No.
It's a short version of The Suburbs. And it's Joe Dante, the guy who did Gremlins, directs it. And it has Tom Hanks in the lead role, and Carrie Fisher, and Bruce Dern, and a couple other people. And Corey Feldman plays this little kid. And he is, I thought, at the time I saw it for the first time when I was like 4, he was the coolest kid. He was like the coolest. He was like the older brother. He like emulated everything that I thought was cool about being a teenager. And then I kept seeing him in more stuff. I saw License to Drive. I saw Dream a Little Dream. And he sort of just became like, to me, the epitome of cool. And to the point of when I remember rewatching these movies that I hadn't really remembered, like from my childhood, like Goonies and Stand By Me, solely because he was in them. And like with Vanilla Ice and Trauma, I thought he was severely underrated as an actor. And he sort of becomes blacklisted for a number of different reasons. And I always thought that was a shame. I thought for a while, like he really, same with Vanilla Ice, like I thought both of them, there was a time when they really deserved to come back. But I think sort of the stigma behind the image, the perception people had of them, sort of the same with like the perception of the Faroese as a homophobic place, which it isn't. When people have these prejudices, it can really damage you. So there was a time when both of them sort of had this, they were sort of doing this comeback thing. And that was a time when I was like 14. It was like 2004, 14, 15. And I was on board, but the whole world wasn't necessarily. So I was really pushing for it. And Corey Feldman did a movie called The Birthday in 2004, which I think is really underrated. And that was like one of his first lead roles in a while. And I think if that movie had gotten the respect it deserved, we would be seeing a lot, different from Corey now. Like since then, he's sort of been doing bit roles, cameos and stuff. But I think for a while he could have had that.
Why do you think it's not taken off again?
I think it's a number of reasons. One of them is that there is a stigma for child actors. It's really hard to get rid of that stigma. If you're a child actor, people only view you as a child actor, and only very few can make it without the former child actor sort of title. And even when they do, it's hard to keep it. The other thing is that he actually sort of got blacklisted by people who didn't want to see him succeed because of, what he sort of saw and was a victim to. And that's sort of what we've seen as well. Like Brendan Fraser has been open about it, that he was blacklisted for a while just because he didn't take it nicely when he got sexually assaulted. Rosario Dawson, no, not Dawson. Rose McGowan is another one. Who sort of, you don't have to even speak out publicly about what's happening to you. Just by complaining about it to someone can have your entire career sort of taken from you.
So there's these powerful people who are taking advantage of their power and harassing and sexually abusing people. Yeah. And if anybody says anything, then they use this power to have them give these people some consequences for doing that.
Yeah, because I think it's really important to use your power that way if you're in that position, so other people won't try to speak up. Right. Which is why, for example, with Harvey Weinstein, he was able to get away with what he did for over 30 years because people saw like, oh, I can try to speak up, but then my career will be ruined.
Right. Yeah. So then the whole environment is just people enabling them, and
Yeah, because the birthday was filmed completely independently, and it was only released in Spain. Like Hollywood wouldn't touch it. So if you have that stigma, like if somebody says like not him, you can't get good distribution in North America. And of course, if you can't get good distribution in North America, if nobody sees your comeback movie, how are you going to do a comeback? You know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And did you meet Corey?
I have not met him. I've conversed with him a couple of times through email.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's
How did that start?
I was making a movie called The Breeding, which when it first happened, because I wanted him to be in it. And this was during his sort of comeback, and I wasn't really offering any money, so that didn't go too well. But he was really nice to respond and talk, back and forth. And then I hadn't really talked to him for years until I bought his vinyl album, and apparently there was some problem at the post office, so they asked for more money.
Yeah,
but that was fun though, because it was fun hearing from him again. Because I mean, I love the man, and if he wants extra $100, I'll give it to him. and I mean, he gave me a signed picture.
Tell
of
people
himself.
what are you referring to here? What happened with that?
Well, I bought an album from him on his website, because I watched his interview podcast with Steve-O. Because again, like if one of my idols is on a podcast, I'll watch it just in case he says something I don't know, which usually never happens. But you gotta. It was
a good episode.
Yeah, I thought it really was. And he just reminded me, like, oh yeah, he's re-releasing a lot of his old songs, and he's releasing a new album, and I haven't bought him yet. So I decided to go on his website, and I bought the album, and then I got a nice letter from one of his angels, and she was like, and this is Iceland's fault, and she's like, we don't usually ship to Iceland, and it's actually getting really expensive. Could you please send us more money for shipping? And I was like, yeah. Yeah. But now I had a contact again through email. So we started talking, and I was actually I asked him if he wanted to be on my new album, and he said he would consider it, and I haven't heard back since. But at least
he's still considering it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I didn't get a no. Like I didn't get a no, and I didn't get a leave us alone or like a silence. I got like, hey, thanks for keeping me in mind.
That's one thing I've found out about show business, is that you never get no's. You just get.
You never got no's before?
People will say stuff like, "I'll consider it. I'll think about it. We'll
keep in touch."
Yeah, we'll keep in touch. And
I've gotten no's though.
Got no's those.
Sometimes I've gotten no's. Sometimes they will eventually
rude.
If you keep calling them, hey,
it's less rude than the other option.
You think so? I think actually being honest is never the worst option.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. Well, I said rude, but then I thought, no, that's actually not rude. It's the other thing that's rude.
The other thing that's rude.
Yeah.
But if you keep on calling, like, hey, have you checked it out? What do you say? Mm-hmm. Eventually they'll go like, yeah, we thought about it, and you're not right for the thing.
Yeah. I'm bitter about Hurra, the nightclub here.
Okay.
Because I know other people have tried. Other people have tried to put on comedy. Some people have put on comedy shows there, and some people have tried to make regular events there, comedy events. And I during COVID, or last year, in the spring of last year, spring of 2021. I was shopping around, looking for some place where I was just trying to see if I could get some comedy night started.
Yeah. Because you're also a pretty good event organizer.
I like doing it.
Yeah. Well, that's a plus too.
Yeah.
Because other comedians sort of do it just to get gigs.
Yeah, there's something I like about it also.
That's good. I mean, you should like what you do.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking to Hurra, and they were doing the whole, yeah, sure, let's talk about it. Come down here, and I went down there and talked to a guy, and he seemed like interested, and I just nothing happens,
Yeah. Oh, I hate when that happens. I think I've been too close to the mic. Should we start over?
Yeah, let's talk about the mouse. Anyway, so that annoyed me.
Yeah, no,
but
I would want an answer.
I didn't get So, but now we are getting to the part of the podcast which I started on my last podcast with Mette.
Okay, I haven't seen that one yet.
No, it's not out. So.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah,
Good.
I'm taking forever editing these things, but
good thing I didn't pretend to have seen it. That would have been awkward. Like, yeah, that was actually your best episode.
Would have been very rude.
Yeah. No, I try to be honest.
Good stuff. And that's not what the next part is. The next part is where we make up something. We're going to try and make the juiciest, like 2-minute video where you're revealing something crazy about your life that's gonna get people hooked, and it's got to seem like it's real.
Okay.
So we got to make up something.
Okay. And it's for like the promos.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So I'm gonna cut it so that it's like a little standalone video where you're pretending like you're opening up about something that's almost unbelievable, but we're gonna pretend like it's real. What comes to mind? I'll give you some context. Mette revealed that she's pregnant with twins. She's not.
No, I got it.
Yeah, she's not actually.
Cool.
And then she was talking about it, and eventually she says that how it happened was there was a man, a wolf man. And
that's too far. I have something. I don't know. I think it's actually pretty good because I had a dream once that I could have sworn was really happening at the time.
What was the dream about?
I was traveling through Africa, and I was staying in this cabin.
Okay, let's start over. So I'm gonna pretend like I'm asking you. So you told me about the trip to Africa once. Can you tell me about that? What was it that happened in Africa?
This was one of the most craziest experiences of my life because I was in this cabin in Ghana, and I was asleep. And when I open up my eyes, I see there's a baboon in the cabin, just like walking around, eating chips that we had left around. When you think about like the fact like, oh, don't leave chips around because it might attract like, I don't know, roaches, insects, you don't think a fucking baboon is going to go inside. And it hasn't spotted me, okay? So I'm laying like this, and I'm
terrified.
I'm fucking terrified. And I like, are baboons like, are they like strong? Like, can this animal fuck me up?
So you're trying to go over what information do I know about baboons?
Like, what do I actually know about baboons? And he's like, he hasn't seen me. So if he can fuck me up, I'm still good. And he's just like looking at chips and stuff. And I have my phone on me. So I like Google it, like, how strong are baboons? And apparently they can like rip your face off. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to pretend I'm not here.
If it said the baboon can't rip your face off,
I would have been like, shoo, get out of here, baboon.
Right.
But no, they're like super strong and can get super mean. So I pretended not to be there and hoped that the fucking baboon would not see me. And I could not sleep for the rest of the night. I was just like, it's like hiding under this sleeping bag. Like with one eye, like it didn't notice me, thankfully. And eventually it left. But yeah, if you're ever sleeping in a cabin in the middle of Africa, don't leave your lights on and don't leave chips everywhere.
You heard it here first, folks. For all you people traveling to Africa.
Yeah. It's a big continent.
Yeah.
Ghana is in Africa, right?
I would know.
Yeah, you have to make sure when you edit.
I'm from the Faroe Islands.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it.
Because in my dream it was, and I'm just going to... You can edit it around.
Oh, Ghana is in Africa, definitely.
Right?
If you're actually asking me, yeah.
Okay, good.
I thought I was doing a bit.
Good. No, I was actually asking because I...
It's...
no, it is. It is.
I had a coworker from Ghana once.
You're right. I was just worried I was getting it confused with like a South American country. Okay. Guatemala. Guam is the one I thought like either one I might be. But Guam. In my dream, Ghana was in Africa. And I think when I woke up, I Googled, like, are baboons in Ghana? It's like I was making sure that my dream was accurate. And it felt so real, this dream, that when I went to work at the daycare center, sometimes we lie to the kids.
What?
Yeah. We like tell them Santa Claus is real and Jesus is real and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, those kinds of stuff.
And a friend of mine used to say, like, don't tell anyone, but I'm Batman. So I would actually... I at least once told someone that baboon story, just like, because I thought it was so real in my mind. So I was like, yeah, you know what? As far as they know, it happened. Why not? Because if you tell a kid a story about how you almost got killed by a baboon, adding, and it was a dream, doesn't make the story as fun, I think.
No.
So I just decided to tell them that it really happened.
So so what's real is that you really had that dream.
Yeah, I really had that dream.
You really had that dream.
And what's scary about dreams when you wake, like in dreams when you're sleeping, like to me at least, like it takes me, when I wake up, it's like, oh, that wasn't real? Because I had another dream the other day. I'm going to tell you this. It's going to be a dream podcast.
Dreaming comedians.
Yeah. One can dream. That's the name of your podcast.
It's just two comedians sleeping.
Yeah. I had a dream that I had sent a DM to Kanye West. And this is after, like, he was, after everything that's been going on.
Yeah.
And I was watching YouTube.
Okay, let's do it like it's a real story.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay,
So tell me about that. You told me that you had been talking to Kanye?
So, yeah, this is crazy. I sent a DM to Kanye West because he's apparently like...
On Twitter?
No, on Instagram. And it was just like, hey, man, I'm a big fan. Don't let the powers to be screw with you. Yay, 24. Like, you know, just showing support because he was like hanging out with all these dregs of society. And I was like, I'm a drag of society. You should hang out with me.
So and he probably gets
a lot of these. And I thought,
day.
like, nothing's going to happen. But then I was watching a stream with Kanye, and he was going through his DMs on the stream. But I was like half asleep watching it. And I saw that he saw my DM, and he starts to Google me. But everything he finds are just these terrible clips. Like, not the things I would show him if I wanted, like, if I was going to do, like, a resume to Ye.
Yeah.
Like, the clips he was watching was stuff, like, I would not have chosen. So I felt like I was just, like, knocking on, like, I was like the guy in Breaking Bad, like yelling, like, no, Ye, not those videos.
Google isn't wingmanning you.
No, he's not.
No, blocking you, in fact, almost.
But what happened on the stream is that he was like, oh, this guy's pretty cool. So he actually sends me a DM. And the DM was like, hey, I'm going to be doing Joe Rogan's podcast. Do you want to be a part of it?
What?
Yeah. Because he apparently is trying to, like, do you know Howard Stern? He has like this whack pack, like all these crazy entourage. And he's trying to do something similar. And he wants me to be part of his whack pack. But I was watching this half asleep. So when I woke up, I was like, yeah, I mean, parts of it was a dream. Like, obviously, I remember he actually did watch my videos. But him sending me a DM, I dreamt that. But then I looked at my phone. There it was.
Wow.
So I'm going on Rogan in February 2023 with Kanye West.
Well, like, is that like for real?
Yeah.
Are you shitting me right now?
No.
Have you talked about this anywhere? Or?
No, this is an exclusive. But you should use the baboon story rather. I think that's more believable.
I'm gonna use this.
No, use the baboon story.
No.
Oh, come on. Oh, you do two promotions then, because I really like that baboon story.
Okay, I'll do both.
Thank you.
All right.
But yeah, so what happened was that when I actually woke up for real,
yeah,
I was really sad and angry because in my dream I was half asleep and dreaming.
Yeah.
So in my dream I woke up and said it was just a dream, and then looked at my phone and saw a message from Kanye. It was like, I'm gonna be on Joe Rogan, and that's when I wake up.
So this is like Inception at this point.
Yeah,
a little bit. So what actually happened? There was no DM.
I just what really happened.
Kanye never tried to reach out.
No. Okay. What really happened is I just fell asleep and I dreamt this entire thing, and then I woke up and it was really, again, it's like, it really sucks when you wake up in your dream and you wake up and go, it wasn't a dream, and then you wake up for real and it's all a dream. It's like the biggest cock tease.
Yeah.
So
dreams.
Dreams are weird. Actually, you know what I dreamt last night?
What?
I dreamt that I was in New York.
Oh, let's tell this like it's a real story. So,
okay, so last time
you were in New York.
Yeah, last time I was in New York, they had this zoo without any bars. So it's just like all animals living together. And I thought that this is sort of sweet, you know? But then this elephant was walking into like this water, and these two hippos attacked it and fucking killed it. And I thought, I was like, this is horrible.
So it's just like simulated wilderness.
Yeah. And I was like, why would you do it this way? I felt really bad watching that elephant get killed.
They have that in New York.
No. Is it what?
Oh, for the purpose of this story.
Oh, yeah, no. It's in Madison. No, not Madison. It's in Central Park.
Oh.
Yeah. They have a barless zoo.
Yeah.
And there was a lion there just sleeping. I was like, that lion's going to kill somebody. But no, turned out it was the hippos.
Mm.
The lion was actually just pretty chill. But the two hippos, I think I probably dreamt this because I recently watched the beginning of Madagascar. Sorry that I'm ruining the setup.
Do you have any other dreams you want to tell, like real stories?
Probably. I don't remember anyone right now.
Okay.
These are all the dreams I currently remember.
All right. Next, write all your dreams down.
Yeah.
And next time I'll have you come back and we're just gonna go over stories and tell them like they're real.
But yeah, dreams fuck me up, man. They're like, speaking of elephants dying, I heard they bombed the zoo in Dresden, and they bombed the zoo in Baghdad when they were attacking those cities, 1945 and 2003. And apparently the sound of elephants burning to death is apparently like the most haunting, horrifying thing you can hear.
We're gonna end on that note.
Nice, cool.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. Don't be a zookeeper in a war zone.
Now you know what burning elephants sound like.
Well, no, you don't, but you know it's terrible.
Is there anything else you want to end on? Do you have anything to plug or?
Do I have anything to plug?
Your album?
Yeah, go to Spotify. Born in Jonestown is the name of the album.
What's it referencing? Born in Jonestown.
It's called Born in Jonestown because do you know Jonestown?
The massacre?
Well, it was a place first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jim Jones is
I thought it became a place from the massacre.
No, it was a place before. Okay, so Jim Jones is a guy who was a priest, and he was actually one of the first priests in U.S. to have non-segregated churches. Mm-hmm. So he was the first guy to have like blacks and whites and Asians and everyone together in the same church. And he was a very big proponent of the civil rights movement for a while. And when 1968 is known in the civil rights movement as the year of assassinations, the FBI, most likely, took part in the murder of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, Robert Kennedy. And Jim Jones thought he was next. So he and his supporters moved out of the U.S. and created a micronation in Guyana. And they called it Jonestown. And it was this beautiful commune. And as the story goes, he eventually sort of became a little bit of megalomaniac, sort of lost his mind, wouldn't want people to leave. But what's interesting is that the story of the mass suicide is probably not accurate. It's probably a spin. And that is because the story, as we were told, is that these 900 people all drank Kool-Aid. It was actually Flavor Aid with cyanide in it. They drank it, and that's where you say, don't drink the Kool-Aid. But the idea is that they all drank this thing. But what's missing is that the people who didn't drink, like, first of all, do you know why they drank it? They drank it because they were under the impression that the U.S. was coming in to attack them, to kill them all. And a bunch of people didn't drink. And what's interesting is those people died of gunshot wounds. And the official story is that Jim Jones had this death squad, but we have never found the death squad. There's no evidence of the death squad existing or running into the woods. So very similar to Waco, if you looked at Waco, is that it seems that though Jim Jones is probably not a good person, probably did a lot of horrible things, he might not have necessarily been exaggerating when he said we should die on our own accords rather than let the U.S. government kill us. So there is a chance that a lot of the victims, because a lot of people, it was not self-inflicted gunshot wounds. With Jim Jones especially, he allegedly shot himself in the head, but from this angle, which is really weird. And he had a suicide note with different handwritings on it. So there's a lot of fishy stuff in that story. So the name comes from this idea that I'm molded by conspiracy theories. So I'm born in a country that no longer exists. Because in the narrative, like the character I portray in my rap music, Gas Mask Man, is instead of being skeptic, which I am in real life, I'm skeptical of the official story. I take the other side 100%. So whatever the official story is, I side with whatever the other side is. So I am in the sense my character is what he is saying without a shadow of a doubt is that the deep state destroyed this beautiful micronation, which I don't think is necessarily true, but that's the.
They did very similar things to South American countries, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's terrible. Salvador Allende, what they did to him was terrible. Panama, disgusting. 4,000 people died. Mass graves.
Florida.
Florida is another one. No, but it is. I mean, it's the U.S. has a sordid military history, and Noam Chomsky said it best: is that when you look at Noriega, when you look at Saddam Hussein, when you look at Hitler, and this is a straight quote from Noam Chomsky: tyrants are okay, thugs are okay. The reason they become the enemy of the state is because they stop following orders. What the U.S. does is that they never start a war for an altruistic reason. They're not humanitarians. They start a war because they hate competition. And that's why they're fine with, buddying up with Saudi Arabia, Israel. They don't care about the genocides in Burma. They didn't care about the slaughter of the Uyghurs in China until China became an economic enemy again. And what's dangerous is that when you say these things, people assume that you have to choose a side. Like George Bush said, you're either with them or you're with the terrorists. So people like Noam Chomsky and Ron Paul, people that have just sort of like, well, let's just look at the facts. And the facts say that neither side are really necessarily good guys. My character, Gas Mask Man, he decides to, all right, so I'm with the terrorists. I'm pro-terrorist then. I'm anti the U.S. and I'm pro-terrorist. In real life, I actually sort of love the U.S. But what I'm trying to draw attention by being sort of over the top in my music is, and I mentioned this the last time I performed live, is I talked about the U.S., the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. And I'm going to mention this real quick because I think it's a really interesting thing. If you look at, what do you know about the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan?
Very unsuccessful. Took a very long time. Nothing really happened.
Yeah.
They didn't really succeed in anything.
So in 1980 is when Russia invades Afghanistan. And they spend a decade over there. And it's what's actually considered to be one of the reasons the Soviet Union falls, because they run out of money. So there's a huge regime change because of it. The U.S. Backs Boris Yeltsin to become the new president, a pro-American president. He's a drunk. He's basically a puppet. So in that way, that war was sort of a way for the U.S. to destroy the Soviet Union without ever firing a shot. Now, how did they do that? Afghanistan at the time was a pro-communist, pro-Russian government. So Zbigniew Brzezinski and the U.S. start financing and weaponizing, arming the Mujahideen in 1978. So 2 years before Russia invades, America basically gives money to what will eventually become both the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, including Osama bin Laden, to wage war against this pro-communist government, forcing the Russians, in a way, to react. And I'm pretty sure that's what we're seeing now in the Ukraine. Because what we're seeing in the Ukraine is, since there was a coup in 2014 in Ukraine, a pro-Russian government was removed out of power and replaced with a pro-Ukrainian government.
Yeah, pro-Western.
Pro-Western, pro-NATO. And in Kiev, they're all really happy. But there's the Donbas region who really like that pro-Russian president. And what happened is there was a civil war. and a lot of ethnic Russians or pro-Russians were killed. You could say that you can argue with if what somebody did was justified and all that. But what I believe 100%, and of course we will learn later if it's true or not, because it always takes at least 10 years for things to get declassified.
The fog of snow. The fog of war, not snow.
But what it looks like to me is that it's very similar to what happened in the U.S. and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, where you have the West arming people like the Azov Battalion with the intent of killing pro-Russians and bombing Donbass. So Russia feels that they have no other choice but to invade. And the reason why is because they want Russia to be stuck in another 10-year war, which is why they're helping Ukraine just enough with money and weapons, but they're going to make sure no NATO soldier is going to go into that war. It's never going to be America versus Russia. It's always going to be Ukraine versus Russia. And I think the end goal is it's going to be a proxy war with the intent of bankrupting Russia. And hopefully, what they're hoping is we'll have a situation where Putin is removed from power by Russians in a similar manner as Gaddafi or Mussolini. So they can say, hey, we didn't do anything. The Russian tyrant fell because the Russian people wanted him out. And how do you do that? You get the people riled up, and you do that by bankrupting the country. And you do that by forcing them in a long, decade-long war, sanctions. There will be red lines. And I think that's what they're hoping for. A color revolution where, on paper at least, it doesn't look like they did anything. And then 10 years, 20 years later, things are going to be declassified, like with Salvador Allende, like with Noriega, like with all of these people that they have removed from power.
Yeah, they wait just long enough for people to stop caring, and then they feel like, all right, here you go. Here's the truth. Yeah,
because, I mean, it's now 100% official that they took part in the murder of Lumumba, the leader of Congo, in 1960.
Yeah.
Allende in 63. They most likely killed Torriello, the guy who was in charge of Panama before Noriega blew him up. And and I mean, they tried to kill Castro how many times? At least 11. So, and it's really funny. And I mean, come on, they killed the Iranian general, Soleimani. And it's really funny, this idea that this, what they call it, U.S. exceptionalism. No, imagine just for a second if China would kill Colin Powell when he's visiting Taiwan or something. Like, everyone would be so outraged. So it's really funny how the
library's closing.
Oh, shit. All right.
So,
well, yeah.
So they're kicking us out. So ending on that note.
Well, just to throw it out. So that doesn't mean Putin is a good guy, okay? We're not saying anything pro-Putin.
No.
We're just saying the reason why you're supposed to hate him is not really necessarily based on the fact that he's a bad guy.
You don't know the truth.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.